Do you read Stephen King? Good news, there's a club for you. The Losers Club. And guess what? You don't have to die at the hands of a shape-shifting clown to join. No, all you have to do is tune in every Friday as us losers journey through the never-ending wastelands of King's Dominion. Each week, we'll either spend hours reading between the pages of one of his books or chew on his latest tweets and Hollywood headlines. What's more, we're always having guests over. Thomas Jane, Mick Garris, Jerry O'Connell, Mary Lambert, Will Wheaton, and the list goes on. So what are you waiting for? Join us as we read on through long days and pleasant nights.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith With. It's an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Wherever you're listening from, please do hit the subscribe button so you can keep up with the series. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today I'll be talking with Tim Booth from the band James. They've got a brand new record called Living in Extraordinary Times. Tim and I are going to talk about the political and humanitarian points that are heard throughout the record, especially on songs like Many Faces. We're also going to talk about the sound behind songs like Head, which is one of my all-time favorite James songs now. After that, we'll head back 30 years to 1988 to talk a little bit about Strip Mine, which sort of has a thread that runs to this new album. It's Kyle Meredith with James.
How are you doing?
Doing all right. Excited to be talking with you. Loving this new record. I mean, I've loved so many of your records, but it's really exciting to hear this new one as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very proud of this one.
Living in Extraordinary Times, I feel like anybody who's paid attention to anything kind of understands that title, but I thought we'd start there and just ask, like, for you personally, what makes these extraordinary times?
It's like we went down some kind of wormhole about 2 or 3 years ago, some kind of into a Philip Dick alternative universe where everything is, we're in the upside down. You know, we're in Stranger Things upside down. Everything, all the kind of things we assumed we're heading in the right direction from kind of equality rights for all races, all sexes, suddenly look like they're on hold when you have a president of the most powerful country in the world who is clearly not in tune with any of those things and is a, outspoken racist and liar, really, basically. Any kind of values have been turned on their head. And the same in England too, we have this kind of Brexit issue. Both issues, really, Trump and Brexit, weaken the union in, say, in Europe, weaken America's power in the world and benefit Russia. So both seem to really benefit Russia at the moment. There seems to be a rise going on there for a score for Putin on some level or another. So we see everything seems to be turned upside down in terms of, where we thought it was going. It's all about expectation to some degree. And the rise of AI, the rise of technology to eavesdrop on us, the whole kind of algorithmic world that we're moving into is a really strange world that's coming, well charted, I think, by different writers.
Yeah, well, it's really impressive how you worked all of that into your songs, because that's not easy. That's no easy feat to try to do that in a poetic way, in a melodic way, in the way, that you've pulled off on this new record. And yeah, I know there are more than just political songs on this record. There are, it sounds what seems like personal songs too, but with those songs, do you feel like there's a difference in how you're writing songs that are reflective of the world around us in these political natures versus the way you might have in the past?
Not really. And I didn't set out to write political songs. What I do, all our songs are written through improvisation. And just these issues were happening at the time. And the levels of deceit and deception and open kind of hypocrisy is become more and more transparent. And so it's been affecting me, and when it affects me, it ends up coming out in my writing. It isn't like I sit down to write a political song. It's like I'm sitting down to write a lyric to a song I've created through improvisation, and the lyric is telling me what it wants to be about. So they're not conscious. I've only ever written 8 political songs, I think, in my life out of 250. It's not a genre I'm a big fan of at all. It's just that you can't help it. If you're writing from your gut, you can't help but react to what's going on in the world right now. It's so strong, the power shifts that are taking place.
I mean, you have some of the most powerful songs out there that do find themselves, in this realm. I've heard you talk about and call out songs like "This Is America," what Beyonce was doing on Lemonade. When you have songs like this that do arrive in whatever fashion they arrive in, is there any kind of, do you use other songs like that as any kind of barometer to say, well, that's their playmates. That's that's the era that they're all living in together.
No, I just recognize that as artists, and you could cite Eminem's songs too, or some of them. You don't have any choice. That's what you are. If you're really coming from your unconscious or from your gut or whatever you want to label it, you reflect the times you live in, and to some degree, and of course there's tons of me in there. And I can't get away from my own ego like anybody else, just like everybody else. But Nina Simone, I think she said, when she was criticized at the time for writing civil rights anthems, an artist's job, she said, is to reflect the times they live in. I don't go that far. I think an artist's job is to reflect themselves and their reaction to what's going on around them in the most honest way they possibly can. And an artist's job, I think, is to go into the unconscious, because we are 95% unconscious, 5% conscious. And so the rich stuff is in the unconscious. So I write and see what comes out. Almost stream of consciousness. Often at 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up with lyrics, or I stand in front of a microphone and just start improvising. And then you kind of like see what you've written about. And it's like, oh, seems like this song wants to be about this. I don't consciously choose it. If I did, James would be a much more successful band, because I've sabotaged a number of our most melodic songs by putting in some lyric that was too heavy for the song to become a pop song,
Well, I'll have to argue that a little bit, because you've got a lot of classic songs out there.
What I mean is that pop songs, I don't mean pop as in necessarily a good thing, but like on Hey Ma, the catchy song on the record had the chorus, Hey Ma, the boys in body bags coming home in pieces. And it was written about the Iraq War, which was going on at the time. It was one of my one of the other 8 political songs. And yet, if I'd written about love in that same melody, that song would have been released as a single. But because I'd written about politics, it couldn't be released as a single. That's what I mean. It's like sometimes I sabotage, I have to just be true to whatever comes out of me, and I am true to what comes out of me. And sometimes the lyric isn't the lyric that would help us financially or help James become successful,
Well, I could close my eyes and basically point to any song on this record to ask about, but it seems like one of the ones that's really stood out for everybody is Many Faces. I mean, this is such a powerful moment and feels like it's become its own instant classic, with a strong message still attached that is reflective of the time that could have been at any time, I suppose. I don't know if you count that as one of your 8s, but it's definitely of the era. How did that one come about? I mean, that line too, that refrain line that you repeats. Where do you think that came from within you?
I know kind of what inspired it at the time. It was a political thing. It was Trump talking about the wall with Mexicans and how they're rapists and, all that racist tweets he sent out at the time. And so I wrote this line, there's only one human race, many faces, everybody belongs here. But that, interestingly, I don't think is a political song, even though its inspiration was reacting to something that really deeply offended me. Racism, deeply offensive, I find, at all times. And so it came from a political instant, but it's not a political song. It's a song of unity. It's a song about if we don't change our consciousness and stop looking at our differences and defining ourselves by our tribes, whether it be white, black, or English, American, and start to see our common humanity, we're screwed. We're done. Yeah. We've developed such capabilities of destroying ourselves by many different means, whether it be climate change or nuclear options, that if we don't come together and see our similarities, we're done in the next, 50, 100 years. And so the need and the call for love or for raising our consciousness to seeing our similarity, raising it above fear. Very obvious in many ways, a real, could be a Hallmark card in its cliche in one sense, but it's sometimes those cliches have a real truth to them. And so, we started playing that song before it came out, before it was released, and the audience would, like people would just burst into tears in the audience and then start singing it back at us when we'd finished the song, even though it was a song they'd never heard before. So we've had incredible reactions to that song, which has probably been the strongest reactions to a new song we've ever had, actually.
Yeah, I imagine that's such a powerful moment in that show. And, I'll echo that too by saying the same thing happened to me. I mean, I had it in the earbuds just walking around the first time I heard the record. And before the song was over, I was already singing it. I was singing it that night when I went to bed. That's what you look for in music,
Sweet.
are those moments right there.
And it's a kind of 5 or 6 minute song that on the album isn't structured. You only get the chorus at the end of the song.
Right.
Typical James shoot yourself in the foot moment. We've actually done a single version of it where we bring in the chorus a little earlier, because every song we do is improvised. So that one I structured originally. It came from a jam that we might have jammed for 45 minutes, and I choose a bit from 10 minutes in and a bit from 22 minutes in, and then maybe a bit from 40 minutes in, and then you see if you can bring them together. And we didn't really change it from that original structure. So it's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of structure. And we like those structures. We call them journey structures rather than traditional verse, chorus, mid, late, chorus, which is too boring and predictable most of the time. So we left that structure. At the time we couldn't find a different one, and we left it as is. But we are going to do a slightly more predictable version, I think, for radio, because we want that one to get out as a single, because it's chosen itself. The audience have chosen that song really in their reaction for it to be a single, so we want to give it the help that it needs.
Well, I'll bring up another one too, kind of in that same mindset, talking about great music structure and everything. The groove on the song Heads is so infectious, like just the way
great.
that kind of marches along, I think,
I'm so happy you pulled out those two. Those are probably the sonic extremes of the album. And Heads it's one of our, as a band, favorite songs on the album, because it doesn't sound like us, because right. it's in an area we've never been in before. And after 34 years, that's what turns you on to some degree, is trying to get into areas that you've never been in before. We got in this young engineer who was just helping me edit. He was just working the technology to help me edit. And after a few days, I said, do you want to have a go at messing around with some of these songs? Because they've all been recorded to boring drum machines, and we need to change the rhythms. Can you kind of mess them up? And he was like, sure. and he stepped, and he messed up the rhythms beautifully. And the second one he did was Head, and it had us giggling with laughter. Like every time I went and heard it when he'd done it, put him in a room for, a few hours with, all he had was his hands hitting a table and dropping an iPhone in record and shaking water bottles to make that percussion originally.
Wow.
And he got the outline. We overdubbed stuff in the studio to make it more, to get it fuller and richer. But that was the original thing, was like water bottles and dropped iPhones and hands beating a table. And when he played it to each member of the band, we all burst out laughing at exactly the same moment in the song. It was so kind of like, yeah, that's fantastic. And that's a full-on political song. There's two on the record, and that is, but it's got a real optimism at the end. The end is a kind of it's where humanity has to go. It has to be more sharing and more open and more connected. So the end section starts, here's the dream, I the we, tapestry. It's like realizing we're all connected, and that if we don't get into this state of unity, we're done.
Well, I want to sort of take how the album ends and, connect the present to the past too. The album ends with a question, what's it all about? And
great.
Yeah, maybe you did that on purpose. I hope you did that on purpose a little bit.
I always wanted that song to be the last song on the record. I like your choices of songs. It's a 6-7 minute song. It's a real Journey song. I edited that one from an hour jam, and we had so many parts I wanted to get into the song, so it ended up being a long song. And it holds. It kind of works. Some Journey songs you go, no, you can't get all those parts in. You have to drop something. But this one, I got all the bits I wanted in. And live, it's a monster. It can go on for 10, 12 minutes live, because we improvise when we play it live. So your question is I end the album on a question, which is probably the right thing to do, isn't it, really? Because we're in the middle of this huge changes that are going on. We're in the middle of this poison that is also creating a lot of medicines, Black Lives Matter, the women's movement, the kids from Florida, Esther Perel as a writer on relationships, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, Noah Harari's Sapiens and all his. I'm reading his recent book. It's incredible on how algorithms are going to be controlling our lives. So the medicines are coming through as well as the poisons are becoming more explicit and more outed, because Trump is only really saying what was always going on behind closed doors anyway. But now it's out there, and hopefully, we'll get through this. But it's and the album is optimistic. It's a very uplifting record. But in the end, you've got to go, what's it all about?
Well,
that's probably the most honest reaction to the chaos and craziness that we're witnessing right now.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You take how this album ends, and then you back up exactly 30 years. This is when Strip Mine was released, and you get the opening song there with What For, which in a different time, as I understand it, almost asks a very similar question, as the narrator in that song is a man who's, either down on his luck or in a bad spot or whatever, and he looks up in the sky, and that's the question there too. What for? Why?
Yeah, that's I've had to accept recently that one of my prime directives. I think people come into these lives with real strong inbuilt motivations, and mine has always been trying to work out what's it for? Why? What are we doing here? Is there an intelligence to life? I came in with that one, and it's always been a major part of my journey, really. Hence, all the crazy stuff I do in my private life. With I've been meditating since I was 21. When being a meditating singer in a rock and roll band was very, very uncool. And I teach a dance movement that takes people into trance states. I go into trance states myself. I like medicine journeys. I believe in. You get to some really interesting altered states, and sometimes when you meditate for days and days, the same thing happens. And so I've always had that kind of drive to try and get under the skin of life and find out what the hell's going on. And in the end, you only find answers for yourself. You don't find religions. Which I just think one size doesn't fit all, really. And I think it's much more interesting to go on your own journey and find your own answers. And making music is one of my tools for self-expression and self-discovery. And we're passionate about what we do.
Well, I hope you don't mind spending a little bit of time in that past, as I do like to ask about the big anniversary albums, when they come around. But that album, Strip Mine, just to ask a couple questions about it, it is funny how time and context can totally change how a song sounds. I wasn't listening to this kind of music in 1988. I mean, for me, I was 7 or 8 years old by the time this record came out. I wasn't bogged down with the context, whatever the first album did or didn't do it, how it was recorded. So when I hear that now, it's one of the first times going finally back and listening to that one. It's such a great record and as good as anything you've done, but I expect that you probably hear that record different, having been in the situation that led into it.
I think, we put everything into every record, and I don't really have a record I don't love. I have a lot of actor friends, and at one point, I was trained as an actor, and I was doing quite well as an actor. But you don't get to choose your part, and they all are so frustrated, even the great ones I know, because for years they might not get a juicy part. And the great thing about James is we haven't released a song we haven't loved, and I've written every lyric, and I write from what's going on for me, and they reflect me at different times in my life. But we put a ton into what we do. So no, when I hear Strip Mine, I hear the naivety there. I hear an innocence. I hear some production things that weren't quite satisfactory. But generally, I'm really proud of a lot of those songs because they reflect us at the time and the people we were working with at the time and, our stage of development.
Yeah, well, those songs are so shout out loud and singable. Really an enjoyable listen. And looking, I was finding the reviews and everything, and I thought, what an interesting contrast about what was happening in the press as far as how this album was received versus, the building success that you all were having on the live show. Like, I don't have a lot of other bands I can compare that to where this album feels like what it looks like at the time almost went unheard, even as you all were rising and becoming so much bigger. It's kind of mind-blowing, I guess.
Yeah, it was audiences, we always wanted to make it from live. Originally, James didn't want to release records at all. We were very naive. The real test of a great band is how good they are live, how authentic they are, how spontaneous, how in the moment. And so when Factory came and said, we want to do a single with you or an album, we were like, no, we don't want to release records. But then we couldn't get gigs without a record. So we were like, okay, we'll do a single. Not an album? No, just a single. And then they came back after that. Can we do an album? No, another single. And so we were really parsimonious and foolish is probably a better word for it, with how we were approaching things. But the live audiences built up because they got that we were offering something different, which I think we still do. You know, we're not the Grateful Dead. We don't jam for hours and hours, but we do improvise and we do change the set every night. And we have hundreds of, songs in rotation, or probably not hundreds, but 90 that we can call on quite quickly to play. And we might change the set mid-set if it's not working. And we change the gig is different in Seattle than it would be in LA or in London on a Friday night, different to a gig on a Monday night. And that's why people keep coming back to us, because we are always looking for that spontaneous communication where it's alive. It's not a theater act where we're doing the same set night after night after night, where basically it becomes a dead thing. It's an interreactive experiment with the people in the room. And we react to the audience and how they listen to us, and they react to us, and then the thing grows, and it's organic, and it's very exciting. And that's why we survived 34 years. This album's getting the best reviews we probably ever had, talking of reviews, because, we've not been the press darlings because we've been an awkward band to place anywhere. We didn't fit in the Manchester scene, even though they tried. We geographically came from Manchester. We didn't fit in Britpop. They tried to fit us there. The Smiths tried to link us with the Smiths, but we came before the Smiths. So James has always been a pretty bloody-minded, idiosyncratic band, and hence we've lasted, I think.
34 years, and to have, so many different entry points for so many different generations of listeners, this new record is going to be one of those. You're going to have the fans that this was the first time they heard James, and that's still got to be a beautiful moment.
It's wonderful. The last three albums, including this one, we've been getting a younger and younger audience, because I think we've wanted more grooves in the song. I've always, I love dancing, so I always love some kind of groove. I'm not talking about real straightforward dance grooves, but just the drummer went a bit more towards grooves. The bass player got a bit sexier and dirtier, Jimmy did, and that's the way we went. And our keyboard player, who's very shy and retiring, used to play so quietly no one could hear him. We insist now on him being turned up. And that's been the big sonic change of the last three albums, I think, that we've got a bit of a groove in there nowadays, which, when you talk about heads, it's in there. Although this album's gone back away from dance, but to more kind of mad grooves, really unusual grooves, but not dance ones, as you'll hear if you play Heads on your podcast.
Well, we're definitely big fans here, especially of these last three records. They've just been so really fun and great, and I'm so happy to be able to talk to you about all of these. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time, and congratulations on living in extraordinary times. I can't wait to hear what comes next after this, too.
Thank you so much. We're already writing. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We'll see you around. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks to Tim Booth from the band James. Again, the new record is called Living in Extraordinary Times. If you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button right now, whether you're listening on YouTube or iTunes or wherever you're getting your podcasts from, and then give it a rating. Leave a review if you can as well. After that, you can head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show every Monday through Thursday from noon to 3 Eastern. You can also find some bonus episodes of this series. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.